Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer
Here we go, Josh.
with my silky smooth low voice, which is why we were recording
Yes.
late. Okay, because if you would have heard me a few days ago, well, you wouldn't have heard me because I couldn't talk. So today we're going to talk about Jordan Peele's new film, Us. It's a horror film, but much like his previous film, Get Out, there's definitely a deeper meaning in this film that he wants us to explore. His movie earned $71 million at the box office on opening weekend, which is the highest opening weekend gross of any original R-rated film, like not based on a previous property. So, Passion of the Christ, Deadpool, those are like number one, number two, as far as like R-rated films. But this film is number one as far as like not based on a previous property or, Lord of the Rings or whatever. So that's a pretty big thing. And well, first of all, to think that Lupita Nyong'o hasn't been the star of the film or the front facing star of a film before. That's kind of crazy. But I mean, she obviously has won an Academy Award, and she's an amazing actress, and she has a lot to do in this film, and I think she's awesome in this movie. What do you think about the movie in general?
I'm going to start with this. Two hugely positive things about this film. I can't even emphasize how much I'm blown away by the concept of this film, the idea of this film. And of course, that's all Jordan Peele, writer, director, producer. And we've talked about this in the past, that it just takes one idea. And I'm not saying that you come up with one good idea and the rest of the screenplay gets written. I'm sure there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into making a movie and writing a movie, rewrites and all that other stuff. But this is such a solid, original idea. Original in the fact that he went there. Maybe not so original in the fact that it hasn't been done before on some kind of level. So I was blown away by the concept, and I think it's pure genius that his mind works this way. And I think it's great that he's involved in this new Twilight Zone, because now he can get all of these ideas out if he has more of them. And I'm hoping that he doesn't become stuck in a certain type of genre, M. Night Shyamalan, where he is now the horror concept guy who has this high concept that has blood in it. I'm hoping he's able to branch out into different genres, and I think he can, and I think he will. But for concept alone, this is really thought-provokingly brilliant. And the second thing, which is just unbelievably positive for me, is this must have been the best acting exercise ever. Because think about it. You're playing two different people who are the same but different, and have certain qualities one way as one character and certain qualities the other way, but they're still the same person per se. It is mind-blowing what she does with it, Lupita Nyong'o. She is amazing in this film. So I have a lot of questions, and we can talk about some of my questions, some of my doubts about certain things that happen in this film. There's what I would consider a huge plot hole closer to the end of the movie. We'll get to that. But overall, I had this weird experience when I watched this movie. When I was watching it, it was the opposite of what happened to me with Bohemian Rhapsody. Remember when I was telling you that I was watching Bohemian Rhapsody and I was like, oh yeah, this is good. I cried at Radio Gaga and I was all about it. And I had a cathartic moment. And I was like, that was pretty good. And then I got into the car and I was driving away and it started to fall apart immediately, to where I was like, oh yeah, that was kind of weak. No, what was that? Wait, that didn't happen like that. Wait, did that happen? And it just completely started falling apart, to the point where I had my doubts about even being, socially behind Rami Malek to win the Oscar, for the main fact that he's won everything else, which we talked about on a bunch of different other podcasts. So to square myself with that, I saw Bohemian Rhapsody a second time, and I squared myself with him winning, and I'm fine with that. And the movie is as disjointed as I started to think it was. This movie, Us, the opposite happened. I was semi-disappointed at the end of this movie when I first saw it. And then I'm walking out and I started thinking, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, yeah, okay. Why did Elizabeth Moss do what she did? and we can just now say spoilers from this point on because it's impossible to talk about this film without talking about certain things immediately. So if you haven't seen this movie, I say see it on the big screen. I think it's worth it, and I think it's worth it to see it like on a Saturday night with a big crowd.
Oh yeah.
But that's gonna be my big minus coming up.
I'll say if we're doing spoilers from now on, I'd like to at least get in my little like. I think that it's a scary movie, and I think that if you enjoy horror movies, I think you're really gonna enjoy this movie as a horror movie. There may be things that you're not. There may be things that you're not. You may not agree with, or you may not pick up, or you may not even want to even think about that are put towards you at this movie. But I'd say the first 2/3 of this movie is a solid horror movie, and then once we start getting towards the end, the very very end, then that's when a lot of the themes, the deeper themes, start to come out and start to unravel a lot more. And then and then you can look at it from a bunch of different ways. Did you see this once or twice?
Just one time.
Okay.
Let me just finish this really quick. I want to put a pin in the idea of it being a horror film because I'll tell you the truth. Spoiler alert, I completely disagree with what you just said.
Okay.
I think it's not that I understand why you're saying it's a horror film, but for me, that's my major deficit with this film. But what I was saying was that when I was driving home, I started to say, oh, well, that's a really great concept, like the 11/11, which has been a theme throughout our zeitgeist for probably the last 10 years, at least on Facebook. And then I looked it up, what it actually meant, Jeremiah 11:11. I looked it up, and I was like, okay, that's brilliant. Oh, that's brilliant. And then it started to gel more, and I started to put it together, and I started to go, well, this movie turned out to be better than I thought I was experiencing when I left the theater. So I had the polar opposite of what had happened with me with Bohemian Rhapsody. This film started to make more sense days after. And the one complimentary thing that I can say is that, there's tons of complimentary things I can say, but the one thing that I think is the best for me is that I couldn't stop thinking about this film, for better or worse. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So he has something here, but there's a lot of questions.
I like his way of filmmaking, and especially with this movie, even more so than with Get Out, because I think Get Out was a more codified story, a contained story, and very, singular in its vision. Whereas I think this movie, there's a lot of disparate things that he's pulling together and that he's trying to put in front of you as the film goer. And after seeing it the first time, I got to the end of the film and I was confused, and I was with another guy. We went to go see it together, and we started talking about it afterwards. I'm like, I thought it was going to be about this, but it was, I think, about this. I'm not really sure. And then there were a lot of things that happened earlier on in the movie that I wasn't able to really kind of like, I didn't notice a lot of things, and that's why I went back to see it again, because I was like, there's a few things that I'm not really sure about the timeline. I'm not really sure about exactly what happens when and what I need to be looking at. And I think this movie is one of those movies where you gain a lot more by seeing it a second time. And luckily I was able to go back and do that. And I feel a lot better about, well, not better, but I mean, I feel I enjoy the movie a lot more. I was able to catch more things on screen and orally too, things that I didn't hear the first time that I'm able to hear the second time. And he adds in a lot of really nuanced small things, and he puts all of these like pop culture references in there, and he puts all of these different this different iconography in there, and it's interesting to start to unpack it and to start to figure out what he meant by that, or what and what I got from what he was putting up on screen, and how I may have, because I've read a lot of interviews and stuff of him too, how I may have differed in how I interpreted what he put out there versus what he was maybe going for. So yeah, but you're right. It is a movie that is infinitely discussable, which I think is really cool. Whereas other horror movies, which I do think this is a horror movie, although I'm not a horror movie expert, there were some scary parts in there. There were some, cool kills and all that. There's a vocabulary I think that you would use to talk about horror movies, and I think you could definitely use that same vocabulary to talk about this movie. So I'd like to know why you don't think it's a horror movie.
I understand exactly why everybody says it is, but did you jump? Did you get scared the first time you saw it? Did you jump? Did you go, don't go in there? Did you go, no, not that? Oh my God.
Oh yeah, a couple times I did. Yeah.
Really?
Well,
See,
it wasn't
didn't.
it wasn't a jump. It was a
And-
dread. It was a dread. Especially, I mean, we're in spoilers now, so spoilers. But especially when her son.
Is that a song? Spoilers, spoilers. Here come the spoilers.
Yeah.
That sounded like you were going to do a little theme song. Yeah, jazz hands. Anyway.
Hands across America. Okay, so when when her son walks backwards, and when their car's on fire and they're in the Range Rover, and her son walks backwards, and then we see Red kind of like come out from behind the truck, the red SUV, to grab him. Like, I was like, whoa, that is awesome. I was not expecting that. That was really cool. And there were multiple instances where, there were people in our screening that were jumping and visibly exhorting. They were affected. So I don't know. What did you not have that experience with other people in your?
Oh, yes and no. That moment that you're talking about happens 10 minutes before the movie's over with.
Yeah.
First of all, he backs up. Second of all, the whole the things that scared me the most were the twins and how they turned the twins' acrobatic stuff into a defense or into a murder. What do you call it?
It's an attack.
An attack. Yeah. I was thinking of some kind of weapon. I guess I was thinking of weapon. And the way they looked and the way that the teenage girl looked as the Red family, she was kind of scary. But there were just so many things that just brought me out of the scares. Like, why did he choose to do... Wait, have we talked enough about the positives before we go into the negatives? Because I don't want people to understand...
I'm ready because I really did enjoy this movie, and I did a lot of reading about it, and there's all kinds of things that I just absolutely love about this movie. So I'm happy to try to field questions, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm just saying that I don't want it to be about that this film is not good. It's actually really good. It's just that I have so many questions that things just didn't add up for me. And I'm trying to understand it because the idea and the concept behind what he did, and I saw the twist coming a mile away. But I'm good with that kind of stuff. There was something that was said or done early on. Oh, I know exactly when it was. It's the scene that when you initially see, I want my daughter back. I went, that seemed awfully prominent. What did that mean? Like it stuck somewhere and I knew something was coming. So I'm good with that because I like twists and I like to figure them out and I like to be right about it. So being right about it thrills me. So that there was a twist and that the twist was what it was, I was like, yeah, clever. That's really clever. I like that. But I'll give you an example. When Winston Duke, Gabe Wilson, is on the boat with Red Wilson, I guess.
Abraham,
Red Dad. Abraham?
Yep.
Okay, why do they call him Abraham?
Because that's what she says his name is. That's what Red. That's what the tethered Lupita Nyong'o says his name is. She does a whole preamble and she tells everybody about all of her kids, like you met Gabe, but I met Abraham. Whether I liked him or not, he was the one who I had to be with. And, he
So why do they
me.
have different names?
They have different names because they're different people.
Okay. So when Gabe is being in the black trash bag and Abraham is getting ready, I guess, to throw him over, and he rips that little eye hole.
Yeah.
And it's just borderline silly.
It's supposed to be funny. He's a funny character.
Him being put into a black trash bag and thrown into a river to be killed is funny?
No, but how he opens up the eye hole with his two fingers and then he checks. Yeah. And I think that his character is the comic relief in this film. The way that he deals with that guy is funny. I mean,
Yeah, but nobody laughed at that when they turned around and Abraham turns around and goes around him and doesn't see the big eye through the bag, but everybody else in the theater does. People giggled. So
Oh,
I was just wondering. Yeah.
okay. Not in my screening, but that's fine. So you're saying that like that like broke the concept of like. So you think that Abraham, a guy who's never been above ground until an hour before he's driving this boat, should have all of his faculties and should know exactly what's going on always around him.
Okay, you make a valid point. That's a great point, but where is that in the movie? So I didn't have to think about it.
He's
Like it's not
he's
covered.
barely. He can't really even run or anything. I mean, there's limiting things to those characters. There's things that they're good at. There's things that they're not good at. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, so we're to the point now where, or you're to the point in the movie where you're looking at something like that and you're saying like that doesn't make sense. Therefore, I'm checking out.
Not checking out, just putting it on the list of I didn't understand why he made that choice. Why the director, producer, writer made that choice.
I think he made that choice because it's funny to see the eye.
But we're talking about a moment that's supposed to be scary, and where you bring in levity is your choice as a writer, producer, director. For me, it was unbalanced. It was tonally strange. All of a sudden, it was
Okay.
like this weird moment, and there's a ton of those where it's like you think one thing is going one way, and that's fine. That's what this movie's about. But for me, now I feel bad. Like I feel bad that I'm questioning this great, epic, genius film. But
Okay, what about the character? What about their friends, Josh and Kitty? You know, that's Tim Heidecker and Elizabeth Moss. What about their dynamic and especially like kind of when they get summarily killed like fairly very quickly, like immediately by their doppelgangers, by their tethereds, and Kitty's on the ground and she's, you know, like crawling on the ground and reaching for her husband, and you know she, you know, the Beach Boys is playing in the background. Like that seems a little tonally awkward, but I took that as like, and then especially when she says, you know, call the police, and it starts playing NWA's F the Police. It's kind of like, well, that's supposed to be funny too. Did nobody laugh in your screening? Was everybody like, that's an awkward choice? I don't understand this. I'm very I need to understand all of these choices, and they need to be fit into this very small box.
okay, I kind of don't like your tone. I'm just saying. I'm trying to understand. Okay,
No.
I think the two things that you just described
Yeah.
from Elizabeth Moss and what's the other guy's name?
Tim
I
Heidecker.
don't know that actor's name.
He's from Tim and Eric. It's Tim and Eric Awesome Show, I think, something like that. It was a Comedy Central show. I mean, absurdist humor. That's what Tim Heidecker's known for.
Well, I like both of them in the film. And there is it's not even levity that's brought to those scenes by the Beach Boys song and the NWA song. It's a fact of the matter that what you're hearing, it's irony at its best. It's, you know, visual irony at its best. So yes, people laughed. But when they laughed at the guy with the hole in the bag, they laughed as if it was nonsensical and silly and didn't make any sense. And I'll guarantee you that Jordan Peele wanted people to laugh at NWA and the Beach Boys and her crawling across the floor. And I'll guarantee you it didn't want him to laugh at him in the bag.
Yeah, no, that's true.
There's just something like it's just off for me. And I felt it, and the audience I was with felt it. And it's one minor small scene in a movie that works. 95% of it works. There's just the other 5% are so, I don't understand the choice that he made. And you make perfect sense with Abraham has not been functioning up in this world, so he wouldn't notice everything. Got it. That makes total sense. But then you need to show that. If that's what you meant as a writer, he bumps into stuff. He trips over stuff. He looks the other way when you see the eye hole, something to show us that that's what was being represented. Because I think that you're smarter, meaning you, Josh Knapp, are smarter than most people who go to the movies because you take the time to see a film twice so you can figure those things out. And so that I don't think was an obvious thing for the rest of the people. Let's move on. I don't know how to justify what I'm talking about. It just was weird to me. It was just tonally weird to me. Everything with the father is weird to me.
Huh. Interesting. So each of I did notice, especially the second time, kind of codifying it all together, each of the characters has their own thing in the movie. And I think this is probably some kind of a horror movie trope where, the ground is laid early on, the seeds are planted, the breadcrumbs are laid down, that the daughter has track and field and running in her background, and the parents bring that up. The son is interested in these kinds of magic tricks and things like that, specifically a magic trick that involves him lighting a lighter that's on his hand, which looks a lot like him snapping, which comes in before and after we see that little lighter trick thing. And then the father has the boat. So each of those characters gets their own kind of like, once everybody splits off and they're tethereds, try to grab them and try to, I guess, have a little bit of fun while they kill them. They all split off. The daughter runs. The son goes upstairs and tries to show his tethered the trick, and the tethered's all excited about that. And then the father gets taken out to the boat. So all that stuff makes sense to me, and I like that kind of like formalized storytelling. And the son part's really interesting. I don't know if you noticed I didn't notice it the first time, but the second time watching it, when they're in the car and they're listening to that 5 on It song that comes back later on, gets kind of reconfigured for the end fight scene between the two Lupitas. When they're listening to that rap song, she turns around and she tells her son, she's like, "Hey, Jason, get in the beat and, get on the beat." And she, kind of tells him to, start snapping on the beat. And that motion is very much like what he does later on to try to trigger this trick. And also what the tethered version of Jason, I guess his name's Pluto, does while the car is burning. So like there's these little things that get put in early on in the movie that do come in throughout the movie for each of those characters. And I thought that was just really cool how those things are put together. And that's just one example, but it's throughout the whole movie, these types of things, and how certain, whether it's the wardrobe that's chosen or the music that's chosen, all kind of goes back to the beginning of the film and the kind of 1986 whenever that thing was happening. A lot of this stuff has a basis in, there's like a carnival, like a carny who's wearing a Black Flag shirt. The guy who's the carny for the whack-a-mole that her dad is doing, he has a Black Flag shirt. And then the daughter has a Black Flag shirt. One of the two twin daughters on the beach has a Black Flag shirt. And then later on, she has another Black Flag shirt. Little things. And that Black Flag shirt, the most iconic one, has like 4 vertical white lines, which looks like 1111. And then you see 1111 later on. You see it on the Jeremiah 1111 sign. The guy has 1111 on his head. There's all kinds of things. And also, I have not seen anybody talk about this, but 1111 looks like 4 people standing next to each other. But I've not heard anybody say that. And so I was just looking at that. I was looking at, just in doing research, and I was like, yeah, it does. It looks like 4 people standing there, just like they do at the very big, at the beginning of their interaction with the original family. So there's a lot in this movie, and I'm fine going through it. And if you have any other questions, I would love to hear them, because we haven't even talked about the themes of the movie yet. But do you have more like issues with the construction of the film or with the themes or what?
I'm afraid.
Good. It's a horror movie.
I'm afraid to say anything at this point. No, not necessarily. There are other things that we can talk about later on, but let's go into the themes of the movie because I don't want to be the one that's only I don't want to be the one bagging on this movie. I have questions about this movie, and I think one, they're legitimate
Sure.
questions, and two, I'm telling you how I felt and how the audience felt I was with. It was like one of those things. If you want to go into one more question, since we've just talked about it, is that I love the idea of using 11:11 because I find it a fascinating thing. It's a reoccurring theme in my life. I am one of those people who will not have looked at the clock for hours and then I'll look up the clock and it's 11:11. And it's not just a coincidence, it happens to me all the time. There's been a band that has an album called 11:11. I went and saw their tour, didn't even realize the band's name or the band's album was called 11:11. I was like, oh, look, 11:11, that's everywhere. And then it was the theme of the show. So it continues on. My issue technically with it being in this film is one, first of all, I think it's great that he incorporated it because it's one of those small details and it adds to the thing that she's talking about, coincidences and all that other stuff. But it would have been a little, maybe this is too on the nose or maybe this is too spoon fed, but I think it should have been explained what Jeremiah 11:11 said at some point in the screenplay. And it's not. And I think it's interesting when you read what it does say that it adds so much texture. And I'm somewhere in between going, I'm wondering if you put that in the script, if I had felt that would be spoon fed. But when I saw it was Jeremiah 11:11, I wanted to know what that was because it was so specific that it wasn't just 11:11. It wasn't just a clock. It wasn't just some crazy guy who had it on a poster. It wasn't just a guy who had it etched into his head. It actually said Jeremiah 11:11. And that's the first time I ever realized that was something, you know? Of course, I'm sure there's an 11:11 in the Bible. That makes sense. But I didn't know that it specifically meant something that could have colored the film to me or textured the film in a different way. And so, I mean, I think I'm twofold. I think I'm somewhere between myself and my doppelganger. I believe that it's a great idea not to spoon feed the audience, but at the same time, I was more intrigued about wanting to know what that meant. And I guess that's smart to not spoon feed it so you can go and figure it out on your own. I think it's really great filmmaking, but at the same time, it would have been nice to have something in there that would have said, this is what this means, or this is what Jeremiah 11:11 said. The vagrant on the boardwalk could have been spewing out the Bible verse.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that would have made it any better for me. I'm just saying that it called to me to find out. And I think he did his job by not telling me, but at the same time, I think it would have added to congealing the film for me.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a classier way to get that information out there, to get the words in that scripture out there, which that Jeremiah 11:11 is, therefore, this is what the Lord says, I will bring on them a disaster they cannot escape. Although they cry out to me, I will not listen to them. So what he could have, that's about the best thing I can think of would be having that Jeremiah 11:11 guy saying that, bombastically preaching that particular phrase, that particular verse. But that's about it. I mean, it's there. I can see why. I mean, even if Jordan Peele wanted everybody to know exactly what that scripture said, I could see there being an awkwardness to, that being considered spoon feeding. And also a lot of people have, most people probably that have seen this movie in the theater within the last week have the ability to look that up either in a Bible that they own at home or on the internet or whatever, and they can do a little bit more reading. I think that's one big theme that he wants to put on this movie, and he wants people to take away from this movie, is that like the information in this movie, the questions brought up in this movie, and the feelings that you may feel in this movie shouldn't end with the end credits. They should keep going. And like you said, they did for you, they did for me, enough that I wanted to see it again. So I think that first of all, that's pretty bold, especially nowadays when we're kind of like being spoon fed with media, and we, move from one thing to the next, and we just constantly consume media, and we move on, and we don't really, there's a lot of things that people watch they don't even really pay attention to. They're just like, well, I just watched it, whether it's, I don't know, The Bachelor or something like that, where there's just like, just get it in, get it out. It's a system as opposed to anything that's supposed to spark thought or, real deep thinking or introspection. So I think that's what he wanted to do in this movie, which is that's a tall order. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it worked for me.
Well, let me just say this. I'm gonna contradict exactly everything I just said. I think it's brilliant that he didn't put it in the film because it's been done like that before. So for that reason only, it's a great choice not to explain it completely. Because of course there's been the vagrant on the side of the boardwalk screaming some biblical verse that you're supposed to, Armageddon's coming. We've seen it a million times. So for that reason alone, it shouldn't be in there. But at the same time, it's one of those things that's very interesting. And I'm glad I looked it up, and I'm glad that I have enough faith in this filmmaker to know that he's intrigued me enough to look it up. So that's a good thing. It's totally a good thing. And let's talk about the themes.
Okay. Well, so going into this movie, I thought that it was going to be more based on race and based on the differences or the relationship between races through the history of the United States specifically, and how there can be two separate groups of people living simultaneously and being totally disparate. But as the movie went on, and especially by the end, I thought that having a black family as the main characters was kind of like flipping the kind of like what he did in Get Out, where it's not like all white people. It's not like all Southern redneck white people are racist, and this is why, and I'm going to show you. And they want to take over they want to take over a black man's body, but it's like he specifically was talking about liberal northern white people wanting to do this. So that was an interesting tweak to the traditionally how racist white people are portrayed in movies. In this movie, I thought it was going to be something similar, but then as the movie went on, I realized that it was a more broad class-based observation, and how we've gone through American history and gotten to this point and become a superpower, and we are complicit in people who have been pushed down, and there's some kind of accountability that needs to happen. And I don't even know if he's trying to say something specific. You need to do this right now, but he's trying to at least bring that up to the forefront, or bring it into discussions. So I don't know. It started to codify itself, especially at the end. I was kind of like, okay, so this is all class-based. It's like for every person above there's a person below. For every person who's gotten the benefits of living in this country, there are people who have been detrimentally affected by the way that our country and the way that our politics and capitalism, but also just the way that our society has been structured for the last 300 years, 250 years.
Yes. I'm just going to say yes to everything. No, I thought it was interesting that it was more about entitlement, and meaning that we're entitled to this world and we're not taking advantage of we're taking advantage of this world, and we're not looking at it as if we don't take it for granted. I think it's insignificant that it's a black family.
Yeah.
In this film, it's insignificant. I think the only reason why it's significant is because we're just not used to that on some kind of level, that, the main character is a female and the main character is a black female. It's just like how much they talk about Alien and Aliens, and that whole franchise was never, no other movie up to that point, sci-fi, had been about a woman who survived in space above everybody else, and yada, yada, yada. Although, a lot of feminists, and I tend to agree with them, do argue the point that, only a man would have written the scene with her in her underwear into a movie. Only a heterosexual man.
Underwear, shirt, no bra, by the way.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, you look that good. Why not? Right. But, don't tweet me about that. I'm not making a statement about feminism. I'm not making a statement whether or not I think Ridley should be in underwear. I'm just saying that most women would say only a guy would write that into a sci-fi film. The point to all that was that now it's not significant that it's a female in that role. I mean, it is, but it's not. It shouldn't be something that we're even mentioning. And I think that it takes a film like Us to make $71 million in its first week, and that we now realize it's not about the race of the couple or the family or that kind of stuff, because really I don't think they mention it, do they? I mean,
No.
not really.
Well, I mean, they're a black family. They've got white family friends, but that's really the only. I don't think there's anything that's specified about, like, we're black, therefore this, or they're white, therefore that. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. See, I think that's much more of a leap of greatness, that we don't even concern ourselves with those issues. I didn't necessarily have the same thoughts going into the film. I didn't know if he was going to mix in his really, really interesting satirical way of looking at race like he did in Get Out, and the brilliant moments that really just, it shines so brightly when the father in Get Out says, I would have voted for Obama for a third term. I mean, we all, it's like, I know a black person, his name's Henry. I went to school with him 20 years ago. I have black friends, it's that kind of thing. And instead of doing it like I just did it, Jordan Peele's way smarter. And so he did it in a way that it crept into people's psyche in a different way in Get Out. I'm not saying that it would have been bad that he had done this and that he had done that in this film, but I'm more interested in the fact that it's now going to be a moot point that it's a family of color on any level. It doesn't matter. It's like Rich Crazy Asians. Now that's a thing where now people are going to put money towards people who are writing films about people of Asian descent. And so good, it's all about money for Hollywood. So if this film, Us, makes 71 million in the first weekend, it's no longer going to be about, you should change that to a white guy and he should be 70 years old instead of being a 25-year-old Asian woman. No, the movie's about a 25-year-old Asian woman. Yeah, but I'm paying for the movie, so you need to change it to a 70-year-old bearded white guy. No. So that, for that fact, I think it's great. I actually think that's some of the best parts of this movie, Us, is the fact that there are these subtle societal statements that really, unless you're really focused on them, they're going into your psyche and you don't even know it. And I love that. And I love the fact that, the creepiest thing that I think the Red character does is when she says, "We're Americans." That's like creepy. Like, what was that supposed to represent? For me, it's self-indulgent. For me, it's entitlement. For me, it's wasting our natural resources, all those things. But they're very subtle things in this movie. And I thought that was brilliant. I think if he had hit us over the head with all of those topics, he would all of a sudden become the horror genre. Everybody's calling him the Hitchcock of our generation, all these things. And now he's going to be socially poignant every film. And I think that's a trap. I think that that's unfair for somebody to, pigeonhole a writer director. Even though those statements need to be made in films, it's great that he did it in such interesting ways. Speaking of which, it was days after I saw it that I went, "Oh, that's what that was." Do you remember when Elizabeth Moss's doppelganger was cutting her face?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when she's taking and I was like, why is she cutting her face? You don't see Elizabeth Moss cutting her face. Or what is Elizabeth Moss's character a self-cutter, and then this person, just the doppelganger, interprets it strangely? Do you know why she did that, or why I think she did that?
Was it the plastic surgery?
Yeah, see, you're way smarter than me. It took me like 4 days to realize that. The only thing I think he should have done differently is I think they should have cut where you might have facial scars from plastic surgery. But once again, what my choice is matters not, because I don't have an Oscar and Jordan Peele does. I don't have a movie deal. Jordan Peele does. So the fact that my more obvious choice would have rung true for me doesn't make it the right choice. I'm just saying that actually it's kind of brilliant that he made that unobvious choice because it took me 4 days to put that together. And then when I did, I was like, I was so self-congratulating myself. I was like, yes, I'm smart. I can pick up things in movies, blah, blah. I mean, you're like, yeah, plastic surgery. Because I couldn't figure out why she even mentioned that. And then I never connected it. But that's just...
It's all of it. Every single line, it pushes each of those characters forward. Whether it's the talking about the boat. Did you get the life preserver? Did you get the fire extinguisher? Did you get the flare gun? I knew you wouldn't get the flare gun. Like, and then of course he tries to use the flare gun to kill the tethered of his buddy. So, I mean, and then of course it fails, but
right there, that's a great moment of levity and humor in the appropriate time because you're expecting that doppelganger to go flying out of the boat with the thing in his forehead because it's been done a lot, aka Dead Calm. See that Nicole Kidman film.
Oh,
you're expecting that to happen, and the fact that it doesn't happen brings some form of humor to it, and I think that that's appropriate humor. That tonal humor makes sense to me, unlike the plastic bag thing did.
Okay. Wow. I mean, he's doing pretty good if that's the only part of the humor of the movie that you didn't like. So I don't know. I mean, I would tend to look at.
I'm not saying it's a critical thing. I'm saying for me, it didn't make sense, and everybody else was like, "That's silly." You could hear people in the audience. They were like, "That is dumb." Well, he can't see him. I mean, I'm not the only one who said it.
All right.
Yeah, can we not focus on everything I don't like about this movie? I want to make this clear. I thought this movie was great.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't
see.
Get
you don't
that.
even know that.
I didn't get that from your. Yeah. Well, you said two positive things straight off the bat, and then you started into
great positive thing. You're right. I did. You're right. I did.
So all the people who stopped listening, who are going to rush out and watch us now, they don't know that you like the movie.
I didn't say I didn't like it. I said I have a lot of questions about it, and I still have more questions. Just because I have questions doesn't mean I didn't like it. As a matter of fact, that's actually a compliment to it.
Oh, there you go.
I think I've said the word compliment a couple of times.
You have, yeah.
I think it's you who didn't understand.
You're right. My fault. So what about the...
Wait, are we having our first fight on the podcast?
No, we've definitely had worse fights on a podcast.
Have we? See, you're such a nice, normal person that you think this is a fight. You need to be in my family for like 5 minutes. You're going to be like, that's a fight. See, you're Midwest. I'm Northern.
Yeah.
There's a difference in fighting.
So what about the rabbits? I do know that Jordan Peele is scared of rabbits. In hearing him, I read an article after the first time, before the second time I saw it, and he was talking about how rabbits' eyes are kind of like dead, and then the way that they shoot the title sequence, the credits at the beginning, is just looking at one rabbit and then zooming out to a bunch of rabbits. So I started looking and I was like, yeah, I guess so. I never really noticed that, but there's that. I think there's a lot of iconography with rabbits, and specifically like Alice in Wonderland, things like that. I mean, what did you think about that? Did you think that was kind of like a trope that it's been overused in other movies, or did that bug you at all?
No, not at all. I thought it was brilliant, and I think bunnies are scary too. I always have.
Oh.
Ever since I was a little kid, and I went into one of those petting farms, and like I was like, rabbits have big teeth, and one started to try to bite me, and I was like, wait, what? Peter Cottontail does not bite little human beings. What are you doing? And he's absolutely right with those pinkish, weird-looking eyes. Oh, I get it. I totally get it. But I like that visual metaphor. That makes sense to me. We are breeding like rabbits in this society, and we are taking advantage of the space that we have. And
what did you say?
What?
We're breeding like rabbits?
I said that. Yeah, as human beings, we are breeding faster than our environment can keep up with us.
Oh, okay. In the United States?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think everywhere.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know the exact statistic, but actual resources, because of the way the population is going, it's not lining up.
I think a lot of that has to do with life expectancy. People are living longer now. So even if you have the same birth rate, the longer people live, the more people are going to be on Earth. But anyway, that's a side thing.
Okay.
But so the rabbits for me also made sense as a food source because they do mate, like you said, they mate a lot. I mean, they mate very quickly and have a short gestation period. So you get a lot of rabbits coming very quickly. And so that's what they were eating down there in the underground areas. That was their food source. So, and you get to see it a little bit in the movie, them eating the raw rabbit, which sounds horrible. It looked horrible too. But yeah, and I guess from a logistical standpoint, it kind of makes sense that they would eat rabbits. But then also, like you said, I guess rabbits are kind of creepy too. And also keeping them in cages is similar to how the tethered were kept down underground during, up until the beginning events of this movie. All right, so did you notice we're bouncing around a lot, but did you notice at the very beginning of the movie all the movies that were all the like VHSs that were on the shelves next to the TV? Yeah, I didn't see all of them the first time, but I really looked hard the second time. And they had Goonies, Man with Two Brains, Chud, and The Right Stuff. Those first three made sense to me because you got like underground cannibalistic things in Chud. You've got Goonies where they're underground all the time, and then you've got Man with Two Brains. Obviously, it's kind of like two separate things. One man, two brains. But The Right Stuff was kind of weird to me, and I read a couple articles. There was a Vanity Fair article that Jordan Peele was talking about specifically some of these things, and it kind of makes sense where he kind of talked about the Challenger disaster happened, and he said those 80s images conjure up a feeling of both bliss and innocence, and also the darkest of the dark. So everybody's excited about space travel and the space shuttle and all these launches. In fact, in the Challenger, there was a school teacher in that, along with the other astronauts. So, I mean, I guess that's what he was going for with that, but that did seem like a kind of a weird. It's also weird that The Right Stuff is showing up a lot of places. It was in Captain Marvel. She picked up a Right Stuff box, VHS box. So, I don't know. It's just weird how things like that kind of all happen. I mean, I don't know. I think Steph and I watched The Right Stuff like a year ago or something, but I don't really think about The Right Stuff that often. But yeah, it's just weird how things kind of show up like that frequently or within close proximity of each other.
Have you seen that movie, The Right Stuff?
Yeah, we just watched it again. I own it. We just watched it again like last year.
Wait, did you just say that?
I did just say that.
Oh, you did just say that? I was looking up birth rate versus resources in the world.
Oh, cool. Birth rate has gone up.
New projections, no, lower in the United States than recent
That's
history,
what I thought.
which is
Yeah,
but new projections of escalating growth increase the tension between humanity's expanding needs and what the planet can provide. Then it goes into a whole explanation about how the question of how many people in the Earth can support is a longstanding one that becomes more intense as the world's population and our natural resources keeps booming. It's a long article. But it goes back and forth and talks about how we might not be able to sustain the population that we have now. But anyway, so that's what I took from the rabbits, that, we were breeding without any thought about it, that we were just doing what we were doing as human beings, and we weren't taking any responsibility for the land that we were breeding on.
Okay. Yeah.
I took something from the movie and I'm getting dissed on from you about it. I'm taking something good from the movie.
No, that makes sense.
Wait. I have a question.
Okay.
Have you seen The Right Stuff?
What is that?
Have you seen the movie The Right Stuff?
Oh, it's a movie?
Oh,
I didn't know that.
why do you always top me? No matter what I do, you always get the best of me.
No, it's not true.
But,
Okay, so what about the Shining twins? Was that scary?
I loved them. Yeah, they were scary. I thought that scene when they were walking through the upstairs hallway and you see the legs of the twin and then she flips over, but you don't really see the legs of the twin, although she twitches just a little bit and kind of gives it away. That was scary. And everything about them was scary. And everything about that sequence was pretty scary. It just wasn't a jump scare movie for me. And I'm not saying it was meant to be, but when I think of horror films, I think of jump scares. And also, everybody talked about how gory this movie was. I didn't think it was that bloody.
It wasn't.
It's bloody, but it's not
when I watched
it's not that bad.
When I watched it the second time, they purposefully pointed away from things. There were places where they could have really shown a lot of gore, like especially with the daughter killing the two twins, and with the, I mean, even with the son, I guess a little bit, hitting Elizabeth Moss, and also with Adelaide killing the one of the twins who ends up getting up and all that stuff. Really, there were places that they could have gotten really, they could have gotten really gory with it, but they were always facing one of the family member who's doing the murder. That's not right. I'm not good at describing homicides. The family member who was in the act of murdering the tethered. So they were, and I don't know if it was, especially for the second Shining daughter, when she goes back in to get the keys, I think that specifically was meant to show Adelaide as she was, banging on that girl and, making sure she was dead, how she kind of had this like guttural, instinctual vocal output, these kind of like, heavy breathing guttural sounds coming out of her while she was doing that. And specifically, we see Jason, her son, come in and see her at the end there, and you can see that he starts to wonder about her at that moment, and that comes in later when he obviously has issues with her, doesn't know. I don't know if he knows. Do you think he knows at the end of the movie that she's not who she says she is? Or do you think, okay, so then how does he figure that out? Because he sees her being all weird, I guess, but he's grown. I mean, he's lived his whole life with her. Like, she is his mom. Like, and what makes him able to differentiate between the two, whereas his sister can't and his father can't?
What does the sister say when they're on the beach to the twins? When the twins say, "Your brother's so weird," and then the sister says something.
She says,
like he just has a hard time
focusing. Yeah, and he's building a trench. He's not building like a castle either. He's like building a trench or like a tunnel. I think she says tunnel, which is weird because tunnels, But so yeah, I think she says he has a hard time focusing. That's what she says.
Yeah. It's funny because from this point on in the film, there are a lot of questions that I think are unanswered. And I think that you have to suspend your disbelief in this world to just go over them, because there's a huge one closer to the end of the film that I was like, wait a second, that doesn't really add up. So as for the question about the son, I don't know, maybe it's just an instinct. Maybe it's just after seeing everything that he has seen, and after he has seen the doppelgangers and knows that concept exists. And by the way, are we led to believe that they can't die?
Who?
Because the twin gets back up. The doppelgangers, they can't die.
No, the twin just got knocked over the railing and landed on the table, and she was passed out or whatever.
Yeah, but don't they shoot back to the table later on and the twin is gone?
They do, and then that's when Adelaide goes back in to get the keys, and she knows that the twin is lurking around somewhere because the twin's not there.
So she didn't die there. She just got knocked out and then can get back up.
And she got back up.
Okay. Yeah, that's scary right there when she goes back into the house and she knows she has to run to get the keys. That's scary. Yep. And so maybe it's like a personal taste type of thing. Like certain things scare certain people, and certain like heights don't scare everybody, but heights scare the hell out of me. So, I mean, maybe it's that. I feel like this is maybe it's not the exact description to call this a horror film, because it's so much more than that. So maybe that's why I'm feeling a little bit detached from calling it that, because I feel like there's so much more. I felt that way about Get Out too. Everybody said it's the first genre film to be nominated. It's the first horror film, blah, blah, blah. And it's not, first of all. Second of all, it's really more about these political and social issues than it is about it being the horror film, although that's what it turns into. And everything that happens downstairs, by the way, Jordan Peele has this thing about downstairs too, because in the last two films, everything that bad happens downstairs. or the subway or the tunnel or in this basement area and Get Out. Now that whole area in Get Out in their basement is hell on scary to me.
Yeah.
Just even the idea of the fact that they have some kind of surgical place downstairs is frightening to me. But so back to the son, I think for me, I assumed he knows by his expression on his face. And that brings me to something that I thought was interesting that I don't necessarily understand, but I understand why he chose to do it. There were all those weird smiles in the movie. Have you noticed that? Like, of course, all the doppelgangers don't know how to smile because they're not really happy or they're just living this weird life. So for them to smile is like unusual. So I noticed in the beginning when the father gives the t-shirt to the daughter in the beginning and he does that weird kind of like that big smile thing that he does. And I was like, that's weird. And then the young son, not the doppelganger, but the first son, what's his character's name? I just pulled off of IMDb to look up the world's population. That's depressing, by the way. Don't look that up. Jason. And then the doppelganger is Pluto. Okay, so Jason, when he looks scared, he looks like he's doing that weird smile too. And that's obviously a choice that Jordan Peele made. And then it happens quite a few times throughout the movie. And then at the end, that's what Lupita Nyong'o does, who's the non-doppelganger. When she looks at him, she does that weird smile, that exaggerated smile. And maybe that's how he knows that, this is not who she's presented herself to be, because now she's acting differently than I've ever seen her before. But I never had a mirror for that, which, by the way, all the mirror images in the beginning of the film are brilliant, by the way. But maybe he's never had anything to say, that's a weird quality in my mom, until he saw the doppelgangers, until he saw these people trying to force these smiles and trying to be that way. Because even Red does that at some point when she does that clickety thing on her face with her hands, which is brilliant. And then she does that weird kind of Joker smile. Now that to me is way scarier than anything. And her voice, what she chose as the voice for Red, which has caused some controversy recently. And I certainly don't think, from what I've seen, Lupita Nyong'o has apologized. She didn't mean to vilify people who have this actual disease that caused them for talking that way.
I didn't even know that was
she
a
got
thing.
in trouble. Yeah, she got in trouble because apparently one of the Kennedys speaks that way. And when she heard him, that's what she chose to use that voice. And she said, she's very specific about what she said. She said, I crafted Red with love. You can't craft a character and not love them. Bad, good, or indifferent, or how you feel about what her choices are. I crafted her with love. And I use that as because of what happens in the film with the two little girls and the little girl choking her, the doppelganger choking the original Adeline. I chose to use that quality in speaking because, one, she doesn't speak a whole lot down in the subway. And two, if something had happened to those muscles or her throat or larynx had been crushed, it would have been similar to that. So unfortunately, when you talk like that, it does sound creepy. And so people were saying that it was insensitive, that they were trying to villainize people who sounded that way. I totally get it, but that still doesn't stop it from the fact that when you have a throaty exorcist voice, it's scary. It is scary. I don't think she meant any disrespect. I can tell by the interviews that I don't think that if she had known that that was going to be a controversy, she would have chosen something different. But since this is the choice that she made, even that speech when she's in front of the blackboard and she has her back turned to us, and she's doing the paper doll cutouts and she's giving that whole speech, it's just got this quality of, it sounds more desperate and sorrowful and just deep emotions. And obviously you find out why at the end of the film, that she has this trauma that makes her sound that way. And I thought it was good because it gave it texture later on. It wasn't just that it was a creepy voice to creep people out. It was purposeful. It made physical sense that if her larynx had been crushed on any kind of level, which obviously it was enough for her to pass out, that she would end up sounding that way, and then not making words for such a long period of time would have been difficult too. So I thought it was a great choice. And I also thought it was one of those things where I was creeped out by it, but at the same time, I was sensitive to the fact that there's something else there. There's something else going on here. And of course, you find that out at the end of the film.
Yeah, well, as far as her voice is concerned, I mean, I kind of put it together by the end of the movie. The first time, once I knew the twist, I was like, oh, that makes total sense as to why she can talk and none of the other tethereds can. You never hear any of the other tethereds talk. And it makes sense that she would know how to talk because she came from above instead of being tethered the whole time. So that I thought was kind of cool. And it was kind of like he was giving away the secret early, but in a very, very subtle way. And you don't realize it until you know a little bit more about the world and how it's constructed and kind of like the purposes of that, the above and below. So I thought that was cool. And then back to how you were talking about the smiles and I think that when she finds him once she kills Red, and she goes and finds her son in the locker, and she does that kind of like, I don't know if you remember from when she's putting her son to bed before all this stuff's done, and they see 11:11 on the clock, and she holds her hand up, and her son puts his hand on her hand, and she says, everything's going to be okay. I'll protect you. And then at the end, she says, everything's going to go back to normal. And I don't know if that's like the triggering thing for him, that he realizes it's like, well, obviously not everything's going to go back to normal, but then also I don't know how he knows that she switched with the other, with Red, all those years ago. I'm not really sure, unless it's just a feeling that he has. That's the one part that kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't jive for me. But and that's really the only thing that I have. And as far as the father, being, having the crazy smile, I think one reason why they did that would be so that when we see the flashback of that, so that we see how like morphed the tethered dad is in that situation, because they're weird, disjointed, exaggerated motions that are mimicking, and that it's like they're trying to fight against. It's like the tethereds are trying to fight against what the above ground people are doing. They're trying to be their own people, but they can't. And I think that's another thing that Jordan Peele, I don't think, did as overtly in the dancing scenes when she's dancing to the Nutcracker Suite. I could see it looked like her dancing was exactly the same as the dancing of the girl above, of Adelaide, and maybe that was the point. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna have to watch it again a third time, but I think.
What I say, Adeline? I think I said Adeline. Now that you just said Adelaide,
yeah.
Goes back to Yorgos.
There you go. But anyway, so
you say tomato, I say Yorgos.
But anyway, so maybe that was one of the things where like the above ground and the underground girls both danced perfectly in sync or danced the same, and that would be different than what a normal tethered would do. And so the other tethered saw that, so they saw her as something different, as someone different, and someone who could help them to rise up. We haven't talked about like their red suits and their scissors and their glove. Any of that do anything for you?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I don't know how. I guess you're not supposed to really understand or know how all of that got organized and why they're all wearing red and why they're all like, how did they all get convinced to come up? How did she convince them? How did they find out? How did they break through? Why is it? Yeah, I thought it was an interesting choice, but it didn't necessarily make my mind start analyzing why those choices were made. I just accepted it for what it was, And oh, by the way, the thing about the dancing, maybe the little girl in the tethered area since it is the original little girl, maybe she doesn't have that same kind of awkward movement because she wants to untether because she is the
Yeah.
original, if you will. So she would be dancing like she's always danced and up to that point. So maybe that's why she's not as animated or awkward or disjointed when she is dancing. But then that poses the question of how does the original girl turn into Adeline
Adelaide.
and Adelaide, sorry, Yorgos. Now all I can think about is all those names that we've been mispronouncing for years, Donal and all that other stuff. Anyway, Adelaide, got it. Why does Adelaide become the disjointed, tethered? For example, when the young boy is locked in the closet, Pluto is locked in the closet, and he's screaming, and the non-doppelganger Lupita Nyong'o, say that 40 times, says that one's yours. I think that's yours. And then
That's kind of funny. Isn't that funny? That scene when she says that, she's like, that's yours. Or I think that one's yours or whatever. I think that's kind of funny. Maybe you don't.
do you?
Yeah, kind of, because
Why?
it's something that
Oh.
it's like it's this whole like intense, like, I'm smashing your face into a table, it's breaking the glass, it's very serious. And then, it's like, oh, I got to stop being this like maniacal murderer because like my son's pitching a fit upstairs. So I'll be right back. I don't know. It just seems kind of funny to me. And then especially when the Adelaide says like, that one's yours. Like you might think it's my son. It's not my son. It's your son. You should probably go deal with your son. Like, I don't know. It just seems.
Then she stands up and very structurally turns around and very systematically walks and then turns like she's almost militaristic. So she now is, it's actually a pretty brilliant choice if I break it down, because now she is structurally tethered in our eyes, but she's actually able to move differently because she's not, but yet she's lived there for such a long time, so she would become like that to a degree. So actually, it's a pretty brilliant choice if you think about it. When you break it down, it's one of those movies that the reason why I complimented the concept and spent 15 minutes, by the way, complimenting the movie, is that I don't understand how somebody's mind thinks of things like this. Like, who thinks of these ideas? Who comes up with this concept that, what if there were, or, he's doing some research for something and he realizes that there's more tunnels underneath the United States than there are roads on the United States. Oh, so that sparks this concept. Like, I don't even know where somebody's mind starts. That's why I would hesitate to say anything negative about Jordan Peele, regardless of what somebody might perceive by what I said. They were questions, not criticisms. I don't understand certain parts of this film. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means I'm not able to understand it at this point. Luckily, I have a podcast and a podcast partner who's willing to try to work this out with me, so I might understand it. The point to that is that I don't even understand how somebody's mind thinks that way. It's so brilliant in concept that he just took it to the nth degree, and everything kind of is shadowed by that. Everything is textured by that, because when she gets up from that, I'm sure it's obviously a choice, because she had to rehearse that and make that the choice, and there had to be a justification for that choice. I might not always understand the justification for the choice, but it is really smartly done. Okay, so now that I just said all those great things, can I talk about the one thing that I don't understand why this one certain thing wasn't explained or covered a little bit better. Do you know what I'm getting ready to ask about?
Mm-mm.
What am I going to ask about?
I have no idea.
Oh, you don't know. I thought
The
you said
frisbee on the blanket. Do you remember
No.
that?
Oh,
okay.
yes. And also, what happens after Jason, the little boy, goes to the bathroom and he comes out of the bathroom and he's seen the guy with his hands kind of raised out
Yep.
and it's dripping blood?
Yep.
What happens right after that? Does the guy turn around?
No, he just stands there. The guy stands there for the rest of the movie. Because that guy got out early. Like, he got he had his red suit on, but then he like got out early, killed his Jeremiah 11 upstairs buddy, and he took his place in line. He took his the Jeremiah 11 upstairs guy. He took his coat and was wearing his coat, but then underneath the coat was pants, red shirt, glove, leather glove with the blood off of it. And you saw how he had his hands out. And later on in the movie, when Lupita Nyong'o goes through to go into the haunted house, she sees all of the people in line already, going out into the ocean, and he's there. You can see that he's still there because he's the only one with a coat on and who's not wearing just the red jumpsuit. So he kind of just got out early, killed the Jeremiah 11 guy, got in place. So he like jumped the gun a little bit, but I thought that was kind of cool because it's like a foreboding type of a thing, but we don't know it at the time.
Okay, so my question is this. If what is Lupita Nyong'o's character's name? Adelaide. I was afraid I was going to call her the wrong one. If little Adelaide goes down the escalator, or no, Red comes up the escalator, right? And meets Adelaide in the mirror room upstairs, right?
And it's
right?
backwards. So the Adelaide that we know from the beginning of the movie, the Adelaide that we know that is Lupita Nyong'o with Winston Duke is from below.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got that. But when they meet in the mirror room,
yeah, Adelaide comes up.
The tethered one comes up the escalator to meet the non-tethered human being.
Yes.
The tethered one chokes the non-tethered one and puts her downstairs in a handcuff. What's stopping the non-tethered real girl from coming back up the escalade? What's stopping her? There's no barrier. She walks right around that corner, goes, and then Lupita Nyong'o, who is really tethered Adelaide, goes down the escalator into it to see all the bunnies. There's no stopping anybody from coming and going. Why did not the little girl escape?
I think that, okay, that's a good question. I think that
Finally.
It is. It's a great question. And the only way that I could come up, the only thing that I can think of that would be an explanation is that in that physical area, if you were in that physical area, then you are tethered to the person who's up above. If there's one below and one above, then you are tethered to your doppelganger. If you are both together in the same place, then not so much. So the big thing is that somehow the bigger plot hole is that how did Red get everybody else to not be tethered enough to go upstairs? Like, how did she get them to become more self-aware that they had control over themselves to get themselves upstairs? So as far as the initial, like her being handcuffed with, which by the way, did you notice that Adelaide was handcuffed the whole movie up until she was tethered? In fact, Red even says, tether yourself to the desk or to the table. She was tethered until her tethered was killed. So I thought that was kind of cool. Because she kills her, she chokes her with her chain, and then takes the key and then undoes her shackles.
And it unlocks her.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, but by the theory that you were just talking about, if you can't come up if your doppelganger or the human being who's above is not anywhere near your below, then you can't come up. But since little Adelaide got close to little doppelganger, then she was able to come up the escalator because she was coming closer to her.
I think so. And I think that the weather had something to do with it, kind of like lightning storm, electrical, something. We're getting into, the horror trope type thing. It's this time of night on this day of the year, or full moon or whatever, those are things that are used in horror movies all the time to apologize for what is about to happen. Oh, the only reason why this ever happened is because of this particular instance. You happen to be at this place at this time. It only happens once every 500 years, blah, 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 whatever it is. But that's, I could see them, making, him making that concession and saying, yeah, there was a weird circumstance where the tethered had was that particular girl who was tethered had the wherewithal and had the ability to move up, and then she took advantage of that situation. And what she should have done was she should have exactly mirrored her above ground person that she's tethered to, so that she thought that she was looking into a mirror, but she didn't do that. So she kind of broke that contract.
When you see that flashback, flash forward, whatever you want to call it, back to 1984, 86, when you see her walking through the amusement park, and you see the young lovers having the sip of the drink together, and then you see the tethered people doing it downstairs at the same time. When they go down that hallway, are there people in white coats with clipboards in some of those rooms? Like, no, okay, I
Not
must
that I
have
saw.
imagined that, like, because I it must be just something in my imagination. I was like, because I was thinking if this was some kind of regulated area by other people.
Well,
which
no,
I
they were
don't
just
know why it
abandoned.
would be,
Like
but-
the government tried to create these tethered people to, what was it, to like get them to work or something, kind of like multiplicity style, like, hey, you go work while I go hang out, at the beach type of a thing. I listened to it twice, and I still am trying to process that. But what ended up happening is that it never, they still shared a soul. So they were able to duplicate the body, but they weren't able to duplicate the full human being. And so since the tethereds were so linked to the people they came from, they weren't able to do what they wanted with those beings. And so they just relegated them to the abandoned tunnels underneath the United States.
So it was some form of experiment.
Oh,
that
yeah,
created
yeah.
the tethers. I'm telling you, there's a shot of the hallway going down, and there are people in white coats with clipboards doing experiments or whatever. I'm pretty sure of it. Now that you just said that, because I thought to myself, well, because I was trying to justify how she could get up the escalator and how they could get down and up and all this other stuff and why it wasn't blocked off. And I was like, well, if they're being regulated on some kind of level, because obviously they were, because the first opening shot is all of the rabbits in cages, all organized and locked, and they're in some kind of like classroom looking thing. And then later on, when you go down, all of those are open and the bunnies are running everywhere because the experiment has gone awry. So somebody has had to have been taking
I think the
care
bunnies
of that.
are running everywhere because that's a representation of the tethereds leaving. And the tethereds would keep the rabbits in their cages because that's their food source. Like, they need those rabbits because that's the only thing they can eat. Whenever you go to get a hamburger, your tethered eats the leg of a freaking rabbit. I mean, like a raw leg of rabbit. So it's like they have to have those things to eat because they are forced to eat something. They need to be sustained. They are still human beings. So they have to keep those rabbits available to rip a head off and chow down on it.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing to have a podcast and be able to have a conversation, because I would have never thought of the thing about the real person getting close to the tether. That's why they could exist in the same plane at the same time. That makes perfect sense to me, because I was like, why is that not guarded? And if somebody did escape or get out, why didn't they close up that thing? Like it just didn't make sense. But I guess that's too logical in a way. That's too structural. There was actually something else going on that... the thing about the storm, and it only happens once every 500 years. And on this day, on the 1st of March at 12 a.m. 05 or whatever, they walk the earth. I believe in Halloween, so I guess I have to buy into things like that. All of that makes sense. And it's funny because you came up with a plot hole that I didn't even think about. I didn't even think twice. Like, how did he find out about, how did he figure out that she was who she was? I just assumed that he was that intelligent because he was a smart kid and just saw the world differently, and that he was able to follow his instincts, and his instincts he's realized that something's different, and now that he's seen these people, this is what's different. I mean, maybe he didn't put it all together that she's her, and that was her, Red was his original mom, or should have been his original mom. Maybe he didn't put all that together, but it didn't once cross my mind. I believed it hook, line, and sinker. So I find it interesting that you come up with these ideas that make these questions that I have make sense, right or wrong. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but it does definitely help me go, oh, okay, that makes sense to me now. Okay, oh yeah, that makes sense to me now. You know, it took me 4 days to figure out she was cutting her face because of plastic surgery. So that tells you where my
well, hey, how about this? What about every time Jason tried to do that trick with his little like lighter trick thing? What if Pluto, his doppelganger, was actually lighting something close to his face and burning his face, or doing harm to himself based on what Jason was doing? That's the only that was thought the reason why his face was burned. Pluto had his face burned. That had something to do with maybe what Jason had done in the past, and how it may not have affected Jason, but it affected Pluto.
I thought she said something about that. I thought Red said something about that.
She said he was born with a love of fire, is what she says.
Bottom line is, it's a fascinating concept because they are the same, but they're different. One has a soul, one doesn't. They mirror each other, but are they?
No, though they share the same soul.
Oh, they share the same soul. Even more interesting. I thought she said that one was born without. I thought she said one was born without. Oh, but she says their soul is what tethers them together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Infinitely interesting. I mean, conceptually speaking, you could have a dinner party a month and talk about this movie and not still cover everything. And I can say the ultimate compliment for me personally is that I kept thinking about this film, and I was excited about talking about it, and I do want to see it again. So if anybody got the impression that I wasn't completely on board about this film, I get why they thought that. But those are just questions that need to be filled in, and maybe a second watch of this will make it make sense to me. But I will say this, my doppelganger will say this, that when I saw Get Out, I didn't see it again to fill in the questions. I saw it again to see what I missed and what questions I wasn't even asking. Get Out made sense to me. And I'm not saying that you should ever compare two films from a director. And for a sophomore film, this is spectacular. Usually this is where a writer, a musician, a director falter, is in their sophomore film. Sophomore slump is what they call it. But he doesn't at all. It's conceptually fantastic. It's just some things, maybe the second time I watch it, I'll go, oh, I see why he chose that. Oh, I get why he chose that. It just felt like some things were just, this is the way that it is, accept it for what it is, and don't think twice about it. In a movie like this, that can't be, because everything is so well thought out.
Well, I'm going to brag on Lupita Nyong'o again. And next time you watch it, there's the scene where she's looking out. They're in the bedroom, and Winston Duke is getting all comfortable on the bed, and she's looking out the window, and she says to him, she's like, I just want to leave. I can't handle it here. And she's, visibly shaken. And watch her feet, because she instinctually goes into ballerina's pose.
I noticed that.
Like a position or whatever they call it. I thought that was so cool.
I noticed that.
Because I don't even know at that point that we knew she was a dancer necessarily. Maybe we did. Oh, they did say, she said, oh, get her, the counselor says to the parents, like, if you want to get her back, get her into something, something dance. So anyway, I thought that was so cool just to see her. Oh, and we also see the little mini dance studio downstairs. And I thought that was so cool. This is gonna be my clearinghouse for little things that I picked up the last time. So the second time I watched it. So also down in that little mini studio and their beach house thing, she picks up a stuffed rabbit, which later on Red comes in and cuts the head off. But the first time you see that is in the reflection of the television at the very beginning when she's watching the Hands Across America. So I thought that was so cool that we see the rabbit 3 times. and once in 86.
That's a reflection. Yeah, it's not
It's
the.
yes.
I mean, it is the real rabbit, but it's a reflection.
It's a reflection of the rabbit. It's a reflection of her. Yes, we get to see that 3 times though. That's kind of one of those things. I also want to bring up the score and the music choices, but specifically the score was done by Michael Abels, who also did the score for Get Out, and I think he's doing some amazing work. Whether it's modifying existing songs like the 5 on It song, or whether it's coming up with his own creepy score for this movie. I thought that it was awesome. I've been listening to it throughout the week, and it is. I was listening to it one day just in the living room and Steph was around. She's like, "What is this?" She's like, "Is this that horror movie you just saw?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." I'm sorry, I'll change it to something else. And so yeah, I think we kind of hit on all. Oh, I did think it was cute that they called the digital assistant, instead of calling it Siri or Alexa, they called it Ophelia. That was so cool. And did you also notice that Kitty was dressed in pink and only drank pink things and had pink lipstick? Like everything was pink for Kitty, which, I mean, I guess that makes sense. That was the white. That was Elizabeth Moss. But the second time I watched it, I really noticed it. Like she was only wearing pink. She was drinking rosé. And when her doppelganger's in her room, she's like putting on pink lip gloss stuff. So I thought that was an interesting choice. And then I was reading a little bit about the red costumes, and I wasn't really sure why. I thought maybe red means blood or something like that. But they tied it into Thriller and to what Michael Jackson wore in the Thriller video, how that was like a full red suit, and how that would have been one of the last things that the original Adelaide, who becomes Red, would have remembered about the above was Michael Jackson specifically, and the Thriller video, and the red suit, and the single glove.
Oh.
I don't know if Michael Jackson wore it on his right hand. I was like, why is it only one glove? I mean, it looks creepy. It looks super creepy. I get that. But why the one glove? But in the Thriller video, because I just like watched a portion of it before the podcast, he's not wearing any gloves in the Thriller video. That was like the Billie Jean video or something. I don't know, where he's wearing the sparkly glove. So anyway, that is as good a theory as any for why they're wearing a single glove. Also, did you notice the scissors look like 2 people's heads back to back? I thought that was really cool. The handles of the scissors look like 2 people's, and you got to see that on the poster. And then the initial teaser poster was kind of this like Rorschach test chalk blot thing of 2 heads back to back. A long time, like a year ago, when that teaser poster came out. So I thought that was kind of cool, keeping that iconography through the marketing and into the release of the film. Thought that was kind of cool. And also Itsy Bitsy Spider, that's what she whistles when she's in the Hall of Mirrors, and then later on, right before that's what soon to be Red whistles in the Hall of Mirrors in 1986, and then later on that's what Red whistles right before she gets right after she's impaled and before she gets strangled. So I don't really know the Itsy Bitsy Spider thing up the water spout. Like maybe like down came the rain. There was rain. She came up the water spout, as in like she came maybe into that Hall of Mirrors. Down came the rain, which it was raining. Washed the spider out. I don't know. Pushed her down there. I don't know. It's loose, but you could make some kind of a argument for that. Her being the red being the spider. So anyway, that's all my crazy psycho theories. Anyway, I think there's a definite theme that he's trying to get across, but at the very least, if it can bring up, conversations about, like you said, whether it's environmental discussions or whether it's class discussions or specifically using Hands Across America, something like that to say like we're going to end homelessness by everybody paying $30 and holding hands for 10 minutes. That's an absurdist thing, kind of, when you look back on it, and that's not how things are going to get fixed. But this movie is not how things are going to get fixed either. But maybe this movie will lead people to talk about things a little bit more, or be more open to thinking about class differences and homelessness and things like that, or environmental issues, things like that. That's the cool part, is it's a movie. You can put on it whatever you want and get back from it whatever you put into it. So I don't know. I thought it was an interesting exercise in filmmaking that asks the audience to dig a little bit deeper than just, hey, let's cut off somebody's head.
Do you think this will be on your top 10 list next year?
So far it is, yeah.
Really?
But I mean, I haven't seen that many movies.
Right.
I've seen probably 5 or 6 movies this year that have come out this year. So yes, I think it will be, just because it's that kind of puzzle box of a movie that I know he spent a lot of, the thing that bugs me is people who make movies that I feel that they don't spend any time thinking about them. They're just like, hey, let's get that, let's get this, let's do that. Okay, what do we got? We got the sexy chick, all right, we got the cool car, we got the big explosions, let's do it. And then they move on to the next thing. Whereas I feel like this is something that Jordan Peele really had an instinct to get into it, and he had a great idea and he wanted to flesh that out. Whether it was fleshed out perfectly, whether he could have done it better with more time or with input from other people, I don't know, but this is it's his idea, it's his vision, and it's something that he wanted to share with everyone. And I think he does want people to talk about it more than just hey, this is exactly what it means, and this is everything all laid out. He's been very open about the iconography in the film and the some of the specific themes in the movie, and he hasn't shied away from that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't put your own views into it.
Well, he's got a voice and he's got something interesting to say, and I think people should allow him to keep speaking. And it's definitely a movie that's thought-provoking. It definitely holds you. It grabs a hold of you and does not let you go to the end. And I'm still thinking about it. I just think that, this whole thing about him being the next Hitchcock is kind of I don't know how to say this without criticizing or without sounding like I'm criticizing one of those two men. I actually think that is underestimating what Jordan Peele can do. But that means that sounds like I'm dissing on Hitchcock, which is totally not the truth. I just think that Jordan Peele is Jordan Peele and Hitchcock is Hitchcock. I understand the whole concept twist and interesting twist and plot twist and the semi-thriller horror genre that Hitchcock was known for, and that one thing looked one way in his films and then it turned out to be another way. He was brilliant at that kind of stuff. I just think that Jordan Peele has a voice, and maybe it's not always understandable on a certain level. Maybe I don't understand the tone that he's going for, and I meant that as a sound, not as in the tone of the scene. But his voice is loud and strong and interesting, and he has something interesting to say, and it's written all over this movie. This is a complex movie that has a lot of things to say, and I think, thank God it's made a gazillion dollars, because now people won't hesitate to give him money. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm sure it sounds to me like Jordan Peele, from what I've read, is the type of person who is like, well, I know somebody who has this great idea for a movie, instead of giving me this money for this movie, give this person their $25 million or whatever. Let them make that movie. And it's just going to snowball from that point on. Because conceptually speaking, I can't say enough about this film. I almost want to understand it completely so I can understand where it came from. But I don't know if I ever will, because my brain just doesn't think that way, But it is quite brilliant, the idea of this movie.
Well, and I also think that if the heads of studios need to hear that Jordan Peele, that people saying Jordan Peele's the next Hitchcock or Jordan Peele is better than Hitchcock, then fine. Because if that gets them to greenlight his next movie, then great. Hopefully the success of this movie will allow him to kind of go out and pick whatever he wants to do next, wherever he wants to do it. And you're right, though. He's also not only doing, directing and writing his own movies. He is executive producer of the new Twilight Zone. He's also producing the new Candyman movie, which is a horror movie a horror movie remake. And so he's producing some other things that down the line, he's going to be able to bring people up with him too. So I think that's a good thing down the line. So I'll be there opening. I was there opening night for this movie. I'll be there opening night for his next movie, because I know, for me at least, I know I'm in the hands of a filmmaker who really cares about what he's putting out to the public. So, all right. So you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can get us on Facebook at facebook.com/actorandengineer. And we'll see you next time.